Hello guys, Six Soul here for another edition of a Final Fantasy discussion. This time with my friend Living Lucid. Say hello, Living Lucid.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, man. So, with my last video, Living Lucid was nice enough to leave a very long comment about Gnosticism and other religious themes in Final Fantasy VII. It intrigued me enough to impel me to make this video. So, without further ado, I will let him take it away.
Yeah, basically, it's not really my theory, but it is a theory going around on, for a long time now that Final Fantasy VII is heavily based on Gnosticism. I wouldn't say based on entirely, but it's more of it draws very heavily from the Gnostic faith, as well as, some Jungian psychology and other things like that. But a basic rundown of Gnosticism, for those people who don't know, it is a very old religion that some people would debate that Judaism came first, but other people would say Gnosticism, but that's been a debate going on for decades. But it revolves around the idea that there is a all-powerful life force, and that life force is relatively neutral in its nature, but it flows very infinitely, and it's not really like a guy in the sky type of thing. It's more of a, like I said, just more of a neutral force. But what ended up happening is that in its creation, there was a fall in consciousness, so to speak. So its awareness and its consciousness, its infinite consciousness, fell and was limited by duality by a being called the Demiurge. So the Demiurge is said to be, using their words, a false god, and that false god is basically trying to take complete control and destroy the material world as well as all of humanity. This Demiurge thinks it's the real god type of thing, according to them. And the whole point of this faith is to empower humanity so that humanity can essentially ascend past the Demiurge with the help of a being called Barbello. So that's just a basic, crude summary of what Gnosticism is. There's many different interpretations of Gnosticism. So there's Valentinian Gnosticism, the Apocryphon of John. There's all these different types of it. Final Fantasy VII, from what I've studied, is mainly based off of the Apocryphon of John, but it does draw from other schools as well. So, do you have
Gotcha.
any comments so far?
Well, just for those who don't know, what is the Apocryphon of John?
The Apocryphon of John is an interpretation of Gnosticism, and it basically revolves around Saint John. Is basically, he's telling a story of what God told him Christ told him in a prayer. So he was kind of like, I guess you could say, meditating or praying in some way, and the Christ visited him. So they kind of have a different view of what the Christ is as opposed to standard, Christianity. But yeah, that's basically what the Apocryphon of John is.
Cool, cool. My interpretation of it is always, I feel like modern religions are more closer to Gnosticism than what people realize. I think a lot of modern interpretations have deviated so much that there's like a man in the sky type a scene of heaven and shit, where I've always viewed it as more of if there is a God, then it's a one collective force, like the light stream or the absolute, whatever you want to call it. It's
Right.
it's like 99% of of the world is nothing. Like 99% of us is nothing. The space between cells are infinitely huge, you know. Um, and I like to think that God is just the space between, you know, an atom and an electron, or an atom and another atom, or a thought and a thought, or just a space between everything. Anyways, and that's how I viewed Gnosticism. Kind of like that's how they view the absolute as well,
Right.
and that's clearly evident in Final Fantasy VII that they took some inspiration from that. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, let's get going with what exactly about Final Fantasy VII shows these influences.
Um, well, to basically summarize, it's, the whole thing of Sephiroth's plans, or Sephiroth and Genova's plans, as you stated in your previous video. Um, their their influence on the planet and how the heroes come in to stop them is very important in understanding the connections between this old faith and this game that basically is using these old stories to tell an almost modernized version of it. Um, but yeah, essentially, if we were to follow Genova and Sephiroth throughout Final Fantasy VII, and even throughout the compilation of Crisis Core and Advent Children and whatnot, you'll find that there's many different, even with their names, the very names are very telling of the inspiration that these creators had when they were making this game. But I mean, to start off, there's things like the absolute is that life force in Gnosticism. That's what they call it, and it's an ever-flowing stream of consciousness. Um, they basically you're born from the absolute, and then when you die, your soul is naturally supposed to go back to the absolute, and this almost exactly mirrors the life stream, and how in the or in Final Fantasy VII, the life stream creates life, and then naturally you're supposed to go back to the life stream after death and just re-merge and become one with it. There's the second part of Gnosticism that's very telling is they have a being that they call Barbello, and they refer to her using their words as the first human. She basically she is known as a she, or they consider her to be female, even though technically she's androgynous. But she's the one who's supposed to link humanity with the absolute. So she basically guides the souls back to the absolute. So my connection to the game is, after Aerith dies, she is basically the one there in the live stream who guides the souls back to the live stream, as Sephiroth is trying to, channel the live stream into his direction to, destroy everything and whatnot. So it's, there's a lot of things like that in it. In terms of going back to the beginning, there's the Cetra, who they're considered the first humans, but from what they were saying do you remember the name of the town with all the snow and stuff? I actually forgot the name of it.
Oh shit. I do know, but I can't think of it right now. It's We all know what we're talking about, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, where Cloud does his little snowboarding thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that town. But yeah, I forgot exactly where it was, but somewhere there they do explain that the Cetra, and even in the Final Fantasy VII Ultimania, they mentioned that the Cetra were actually the ones who they would spread the live stream, or the I guess the Mako around. They would basically almost fertilize the planet in a way. this actually kind of mirrors Gnosticism, where the first beings that the Absolute spawned, besides Barbello, were the Aeons, and the Aeons were said to do the same, pretty much the same thing, where they basically spread the glory of God, as they would say. They would basically express God throughout creation, or express the Absolute. So there's a lot of parallels there with that. Also, I also kind of consider the weapons, like Ruby Weapon, Emerald Weapon, and all the weapons that you fight in the game. They're considered to be like these beings that come up that basically protect the planet. Well, the Aeons in Gnosticism do the same thing. So if there's a threat, the Aeons are actually the ones, or the group of Aeons, they're called the Plamora. That's what they're called as a group. So the Plamora basically protects the pure consciousness of the Absolute, similar to how the weapons do protect the life stream in the game. Do you have any any comments so far?
Oh no, you're doing a great job, man. You're not you're not leaving anything for me.
Yeah, so yeah, this is where it gets kind of weird though, but or not weird, but this is where it really starts making connections to the game. The basically in the Gnostic tradition, they tell the story. It doesn't really matter what school it is, whether it's the Apocryphon of John or Valentinian Gnosticism or pre-Christian, but the one of the most famous stories is the fall of Sophia, and the fall of Sophia is basically one of the Aeons. She represents wisdom. She actually um, she tries to find the absolute through logic. At least that's how a lot of the scholars interpret it. So she tries to basically think her way to the absolute, or she tries to, she has this desire to be with the absolute. But that very desire is what influences um, separateness, if that's a word, or duality. So what ends up happening is her negative feelings. They say she falls, and her negative feelings basically create this void. And what ends up happening is these negative feelings, they end up corrupting the overall energy of the consciousness. So the Plamora basically casts her into the void, and she ends up splitting into two. So there's Light Sophia, who found redemption, and then there's Akamoth. So Akamoth is a darker Sophia that is stuck in the void. So this is the Plamora's attempt to keep the negativity down. So if you draw a comparison to Final Fantasy VII, I see this as the how Genova fell from the sky, and there could actually even be a connection with their choice of words. If she did fall, like they say that Sophia fell, she fell from the sky, and she began to spread this virus, or this geostigma-like sickness among the Cetra. And like I said before, the Cetra are kind of similar to the Plamora, or the Aeons. And while she did kill off most of the Cetra, there was this small group that did they did cast her away into the northern crater to prevent from further contamination. So that's exactly what the Plamora did. There's even some texts that use the word contamination, where the Plamora were actually afraid that this Akamoth or this Sophia would contaminate the purity of the absolute with her negativity. So what ended up happening in the Gnostic faith is Akamoth, she began to experience a lot of grief and negativity, so she actually produced a son. So they call it the son of Sophia. So the son is called the Demiurge, or I can't really pronounce his actual name, but they called him Laudaboth or something like that. But most people just call him the Demiurge, and he is classified as a male. They say that he's very ugly and almost animal-like in appearance. A lot of people relate him to Lucifer, and that actually is kind of important to the game also, which I'll explain later. But basically, this Demiurge, he's pretty much psychopathic in the sense that he cannot see any other god above himself, and he's completely ego-based. So what ends up happening is his egoistic desires to suppress creation ends up throwing this flaw into the consciousness, which ends up keeping the consciousness lower. So he creates what they call the seven heavens, which, interestingly, that's the name of Tifa's bar, isn't it?
Yep.
Seven, yeah. So he creates the seven heavens of physical existence, and basically Sophia ends up having the light Sophia. She ends up repenting for what she did, and she hides away in the realm of light, and she doesn't really show herself too much. So what I saw this as, but technically the Demiurge has two mothers. He has Sophia, the light Sophia, and he has Akamoth, because she did split into two. So from Final Fantasy VII, the comparison that I drew was that you have, what do you call it? You have Lucrezia, who she, does whatever she does that I don't want to imagine with Hojo, and she gives birth to Sephiroth. Now, if you look at the nature of why she does this, she does do this in the pursuit of knowledge, which this might be stretching it, but I do draw this I do compare this to how Sophia tries to find the absolute with logic. So, in the pursuit of knowledge, she does give birth to Sephiroth for experiment's sake, and she, like the light Sophia, she does kind of go into some sort of exile, and she ends up in that cave she ends up being crystallized somehow, which I remember you guys were talking about how it's implied that she commits suicide in some way.
That was Camel's theory, yes. Not necessarily mine, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, she somehow ends up, getting trapped in there, and they do kind of portray her as a saint, from what I saw anyways. She does look very, saintly in that thing, and
Definitely.
A lot of the time in Final Fantasy, crystals are associated with light anyways. But yeah, and on the other hand, you have Genova, who that's like Sephiroth's second mother. She's the one who, her cells are living within him. So another thing is they say in Gnosticism that the Demiurge has all of his mother's worst impulses. So I kind of compare that to how Sephiroth, he has a lot of Genova's, he has her very cells, he has her very, how do you say it? What makes him psychotic is because of Genova. And like you said in your previous video, she is pretty much controlling him.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's my theory, but yeah, for sure. Well, I like what I think I
Ever
went
since
over
the whole
this.
Nibelheim thing.
Yeah. I like to think that because Sephiroth he wasn't only injected with Genova cells at birth, he was flooded with a bunch of macro energy as well. So I like to think that that energy is what was keeping him somewhat normal until the Nibelheim incident, where where he falsely learns his identity, and that's what allowed Genova to fully take him over. That's how she did it with Cloud, anyway. So
Right. I do totally. When you said that theory, I totally subscribe to it, because it even kind of ties into this, where it's like, she's basically, there was actually a theory somewhere. This is kind of, going off on a tangent, but just like a small one.
I'll go
there
for it.
was there was actually a theory somewhere that Genova is, she's, I don't know if you played Chrono Trigger, but she's kind of like Lavos, where there is someone who thinks that she's not really like evil. It's more of she's just like this rampaging parasite that doesn't really care, I guess. But I don't know if I subscribe to that. I mean, seeing her in that tube, in Nibelheim, it kind of leads me to believe otherwise. But I don't know. It could be. But yeah. So Sephiroth, like the Demiurge, has two mothers. One of them who repents, and she ends up trying to help humanity, kind of like Lucrezia. She feels grief and guilt for what she does, so she essentially, she tries to help, or she ends up talking to Vincent and helping in that way. But the Demiurge also has a dark mother known as Akamoth. She is the one spreading a lot of the negativity, kind of like Genova. Um, Also, if you look at Genova's name, this was actually mentioned on the wiki page, I believe, for Final Fantasy. But Genova is obviously, it sounds like Jehovah, which is the Judaic god. And the thing about the Gnostics is the Gnostics believed that the Judaic god, Jehovah, and even the Old Testament god and, a lot of the other Western deities, the Gnostics believed that they were false, that they were in some way, that they were the Demiurge. They actually considered those gods to be the Demiurge. So they did think that Jehovah was the Demiurge, in a way. So, and the reason is because Jehovah and the Old Testament God, they like to, if you read the Old Testament, God is very, I don't want to say fear-based,
Oh, he
but
is. You most
okay,
definitely is.
you just said it for
I
me.
said it. I'll take the
but
blame for that.
but yeah, the Jehovah and the Christian God is very fear based. Like even with all these stories of all these floods and all these other things that this God does, the Gnostics very much consider that God to be the Demiurge, because that's how the Demiurge is. Every time there's some sort of insurrection, the Demiurge will come up with some type of plan to put his sheep into place, type of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did consider them to be, or the Jehovah to be, kind of a false god. Also, this is kind of a little bit more of a comparison, is the Cetra were wiped out by Genova. The Gnostics were wiped out by the Judeo-Christians. So they were actually killed. They were killed off very systematically, kind of similar to the Cetra, how they were killed off by, most of them were killed off by um, Genova. So I kind of draw the comparison where the Gnostics were killed off by the Judeo-Christians, kind of in the name of Jehovah.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
So but yeah, so Genova sounds a lot like Jehovah, and also Nova means new. So if you kind of bring those together, kind of like the new god. So the Demiurge, in a way, in Gnosticism, is a new god. So, or he's the false god. The original god is the absolute, is this just neutral life force. So, also Sephiroth in the Kabbalah is from Sephiroth, which means enumeration of gods. So, or Jehovah or Yahweh or whoever's at the top of the tree of life in the Kabbalah, and then a Sephiroth is a manifestation of one of God's traits, very similar to the Aeons. So, in one of the things about Genova is that she is known to be able to mimic almost anything, right? So she can copy things. She even made herself look like the dead relatives of the Cetra to make them trust her. Well, in Gnosticism they say that the Demiurge, he also copies the Absolute. So the Absolute has, because they call him a jealous god. So anything the Absolute has, it's almost like the Demiurge has to have it too. So the Absolute has all these aeons that represent different aspects of him. So the Demiurge, in turn, has a bunch of archons. They call them archons that represent different aspects of the Demiurge. So the Absolute will have aeons like love, mercy, and good things. The Demiurge has aspects like anger, envy, all these darker emotions. So yeah, in the Kabbalah, the Jewish Kabbalah, they have the Jehovah, and then the Sephirot that represent the different aspects. So the Gnostics think that Jehovah is the Demiurge. So if you look at Final Fantasy VII, you have, did I say Jehovah or Jehovah? I'm getting confused now. But yeah, they think Jehovah is the Demiurge. So if you look at Final Fantasy VII, Jehovah has Sephiroth, who's basically like you were saying in your previous video, is like her like her pawn. She just uses him however he wants or however she wants. Similar to how the Demiurge uses his Archons, and Jehovah being the Demiurge in the Gnostics' eyes, how Jehovah uses the Sephiroth to represent different aspects. Um, there are a bunch of arguments though that Jehovah and the Sephiroth they do represent good things as well. I mean, if you look at the Tree of Life, all the things that the Sephiroth represent are good, but just not in the Gnostics from the Gnostics' point of view. But yeah, going on from there, there even in the Apocryphon of John, they talk about how Genova and Sephiroth, or no, not Genova and Sephiroth. In the Apocryphon of John, they talk about how the Demiurge, he basically creates a puppet, and that's their words. They use the word puppet, at least in a lot of the translations. And this puppet he calls Adam. So Adam is basically designed by the Demiurge to be a complete slave. So he wants to create a miniature version of him in his own image. Just like how the Absolute, one of the Aeons is Adamas. So Adamas is the perfect human, like the most realized human. So again, the Demiurge has to copy everything that the Absolute does, so he creates Adam. So what ends up happening though is he realizes that you can't make something animate without energy. So he ends up having to use the Absolute's power to animate Adam. So that's basically what a soul is in the eyes of the Gnostics. So so Adam basically has the power to animate himself and express himself, but it's a double-edged sword, obviously, because now he has the power to find his way back to where he came from, which is the Absolute. So just like this reminds me of Cloud, of how Cloud, he's taken in for experimentation along with Zack, and he's injected with Genova cells, which in Final Fantasy VII makes him, gives him a false identity, and he's in complete control of Genova. He even does, he does things where he even gives like the black materia to Sephiroth and whatnot in the game, and he is a puppet. They even refer to him as a puppet throughout the game, and even in Advent Children they call, or I think Kadaj calls him a puppet or something like that. So
Yeah.
he's also referred to as a puppet, but it's kind of like what you were saying earlier. Cloud also has the Mako, or you were saying how the Mako energy kind of makes Sephiroth, um, maybe that was what was keeping him from being under complete like brainwashing. Well, this is also what gives Cloud a lot of his strength as well as the Mako. So the Mako is made from the Earth, or made from the planet, and the planet, consists of the life stream. So the comparison we drew earlier is the life stream is the Absolute. So it's similar to how Adam was imbued with, he was created to be a puppet, but he was also given the right tools, or he was given the soul to basically, you know, um, be able to go back to where he came from earlier. Do you have any insights so
Um,
far?
you're doing a great job, but yeah, I felt that connection was very strong as well. I think the even though when Hojo was injecting guys like Sephiroth and Cloud and Zack with Mako energy and Genova cells, he thought they were two of the same because he was under the impression that Genova was an ancient. So he thought he didn't even realize that Genova was this malevolent force. Um, so he assumed that the Mako would help would only increase the effectiveness of the Genova cells. But in reality, it it helps it helped all the like Zack and Cloud and even Sephiroth to resist um, to resist Genova's spell. I mean, even when Cloud is under Genova's control and he's considered a puppet, you can tell he's still fighting it quite a bit. You know, he's clearly very strong human being. I feel like if he didn't have that Mako energy, he would be just like one of the guys in the black capes.
Oh yeah, the clones, right?
Yeah. Um, those clones are actually just the old Nibelheim residents that Hojo decided to experiment on because he's an asshole. uh,
The- yeah, those when I first played that when I was young, those clones like freaked me out. It was almost like a Truman Show type of thing to me. Where Cloud goes back, he's like, "Oh, well,
there's,
everyone's acting." Oh
yeah,
no, that was Shinra, right?
huh?
Didn't Shinra they put these like Turks or these like CIA type of people to like
Yeah,
pretend they were yeah
yeah.
yeah
Make sure that no one even talked about it or mentioned anything about it, and just nothing ever happened.
right yeah so I agree. I think that the Mako was kind of a like I said like a double-edged sword, and it put them at a disadvantage. Of course, they didn't know what they were doing when they did that. So it's kind of similar to the Demiurge allowing this life, or the spark. In Gnosticism they call it the spark. So it's a part of the overall consciousness or the life force that powers Adam. But another thing is Adamas. This is stretching it, I think, a little bit. That Adamas is referred to as a perfect human, like how a human or a man should act. Like not act, but purity. Like they're pure and authentic, right?
Yeah.
So the in Jungian psychology and in the teachings of Joseph Campbell, or the writings, I should say, they talk about the hero's journey, where you're supposed to go on this hero's journey throughout life and go through all these trials and whatnot, and then become your best self. And if you notice, especially in Crisis Core, Zack uses the term hero a lot. I mean, the word hero is repeated like multiple times throughout that game. And even at the very end, he even says, would you say that I became a hero? Which, you could say, oh, it's just a, random line or whatever. But I personally think that line is very telling from a symbolic or, a symbolic point of view, where Zack or Adamas is basically the potential of humanity, but Adam is said to be like the legacy of Adamas. So Adam is supposed to live up and achieve um, this enlightened state, this authentic state, like Adamas is. So in Jungian psychology, they call it being authentic, being your authentic self, basically finding yourself. So in a lot of metaphysical schools, they say the higher self, and I feel that this comparison can be drawn to Zack and Cloud. And even in their names, Zack Fair, which is like fair weather, and then Cloud Strife, which obviously he's struggling. There's a lot of strife in his life. Um, Cloud not only takes on the legacy of Zack, like how Adam is supposed to take on the legacy of Adamas, but he also, um, Zack, even though Cloud is basically throughout 7, he thinks he's Zack, or he forgot about Zack, but he took on traits of Zack. It was Zack who got him on that journey in the first place. So, in my opinion, without Cloud thinking he was Zack, which to Cloud that was something to aspire to, because he wanted to be in Soldier. So without Cloud being like that, he may have never went on that journey. If he didn't acquire the Buster Sword, he wouldn't have went on that journey. So, in Gnosticism, Adamas is what Adam aspires to, kind of how Cloud aspires to Zack. And if you notice, Zack was not horribly influenced by the Genova cells. It looked like they didn't do crap to him, which is kind of sad for Cloud. But yeah, so yeah, so Cloud goes on a journey and to find himself, and that's basically the meat of the game. And throughout the game, uh, Sephiroth is the one. Genova and Sephiroth are the ones controlling Cloud, and a lot of, especially Carl Jung, he believed that the Demiurge in Gnosticism is the ego. He thinks it's just a symbol for the ego. And if you think about it, Adam in Gnosticism represents us. So we are Adam. Adam consists of mankind. So if you look at it, you can say Cloud in a way is being controlled by his ego. That's how I interpret it, at least. And eventually they say in the hero's journey that the hero is eventually supposed to go into this horrible, like, dark point in their life, and he's supposed to run into a female figure. And in a lot of the Kabbalistic texts, they refer to this female figure as Tiferet. And this Tiferet is the sixth Sephiroth, or Sephiroth, on the Kabbalah. And this Sephiroth represents integration, balance, kind of like nurturance and self-acceptance type of thing. And in Final Fantasy VII, that's pretty much what Tifa does for Cloud. Like, he gets into that almost catatonic state where he can't move, and he's in the wheelchair, and they fall into the life stream, which the life stream, again, it's the source of all things. And in a lot of psychology, they reference the life stream as being kind of like, or not the life stream, the absolute, as being like a subconscious, like a pure place of pure consciousness. And they fall in, and Tifa's the one who brings all of Cloud's splintered selves together. And there's even a scene where they have that, where Tifa's trying to piece things together with Cloud, and she's the one who helps him. You were the one who mentioned her last name, right?
Yep.
Lockhart. Right.
Totally.
So
yeah.
yes. So yeah, she's basically the one who's doing this. So even her name, Tifa, and then the sixth Sephiroth that is supposed to do that for man or for humans is Tiferet. So it's, to me, it's pretty obvious where they got that, even the name from. And then lastly, I mean, there's a lot of stuff about how the Demiurge, he basically tries all these different methods of trying to take over the world and kill off humanity. One of those methods is a dark cloud that's supposed to come down and kill off all the humans, because he realized, obviously, he made a mistake by, imbuing the humans with this spark. But Barbello, who is referred to as the first human, she basically works with humanity to make sure that humanity does have a safe passage back to the Absolute. So this dark cloud, they don't really explain how, from what I've read, I could be wrong, but this dark cloud that the Demiurge summons is thwarted in some way, but I don't think they really explain it too well. Or maybe, there's kind of old text, so maybe I just didn't understand it. But to me, this might be kind of like, Meteor from 7. And then eventually the Demiurge tries to create a strain of pollution, as they put it. So basically the Archons have sex with the women of the human women, and this, makes them sick. And what ends up happening is Barbello creates healing water for them to, to, basically heal themselves. So the sons of Adam and Eve can heal themselves from this strain of pollution. So in Advent Children, you have Geostigma, which is basically a strain of pollution from Genova, and it gets everyone sick. And then at the end, Aerith has a healing rain, which heals everyone. So I really believe that Aerith, or Eris, whatever you want to call her, is Barbello. Because Barbello is referred to as the first human. Eris is descended from the Cetra, who are considered to be like the first humans of of Final Fantasy VII, and that's basically what the story's about. So in the end, you have, or in the end of Final Fantasy VII, you have Cloud. He beats Sephiroth, but if you notice, Cloud beats Sephiroth from within. It almost seems like he beats him from within in some way, because he does kind of go in his head into that dark space and beats him from within there. And to me, him beating Sephiroth and Jenova is very similar to how one might conquer his ego from the inside. Um, so, I mean, that basically sums it up. There are some things like, uh, this is kind of, this is going to sound really conspiratorial almost, but I don't know if you know, do you know what numerology is?
Yeah,
Right, so you know about, you add up the birthday, or have you done it before?
I've never done it with myself, but like I know the general idea behind it.
Right. So I guess for those people who don't know, it's basically where everything has a vibration or a certain energy, and basically if you add up a certain amount, certain numbers. So if I added like a birthday together, it would come out to one number. So if you add, for instance, Cloud's birthday, this is actually up for debate, but Cloud's birthday, at least in the Ultimania, Final Fantasy VII Ultimania, it's August 11th, 1986. Now, some people say his birthday is actually on the 19th, but the Ultimania, I guess that's the official one, states that it's on the 11th. So if you add, 8 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 9 plus 8 plus 6, it comes out to 7. And I hope I didn't get that wrong, because if I did, that means I don't know basic math. But based on what I added up, it does equal 7. Now, it's not just, Final Fantasy 7 and then Cloud's birthday equals 7. But to me, what that means is, you have the seventh heaven, or 7 heavens. So the point of Gnosticism is to be able to gain the techniques and to learn ways to bypass the Demiurge's game, basically. And you have to ascend through the seven heavens to become a real man, to find yourself. And I find it interesting how his birthday adds up to 7. Now, that could just be a coincidence, but on the other hand, if you take Tifa's birthday, which is May 3rd, 1987, that's 5 plus 3 plus 1 plus 9 plus 8 plus 7, and that equals 6. And Tifa is the 6th Sephiroth in the Kabbalah, or Tiferet is. So, I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, I
Probably
do,
not.
yeah, I'd hope not, because that'd be pretty cool, but yeah, if you do, yeah, I don't know about their names, though, because I know you can add numerical values from their names, but yeah, that's a thing. So my basic interpretation, just to summarize, of Final Fantasy VII with this Gnostic influence and Carl Jung's influence, I honestly believe, I mean, this is kind of obvious anyways, that Final Fantasy VII is about, it's obviously about finding yourself, but these layers of Gnosticism and psychology are added in there to kind of back that up in a way. So I'm not entirely sure. I can't say for sure what their exact motivation was for adding in this symbolism, but I do believe that it could possibly be to reinforce the overall theme of the game, which I think is overcoming yourself and finding yourself and being, who you ought to be. So, I think whether you take that from a spiritual point of view and like, we all go back to God, or we all go back to the source, or if you're not really spiritual at all, but you take it from a more, humanistic point of view of just, finding yourself and being pure, but maybe not pure in a godly sense, but purely yourself, then that's how it's meant to be interpreted. I don't think it's meant to be how do you say it, promotion of a certain religion. I just think that these themes are used. So, to get across the original point.
Yeah, totally agree. You said that it's a stretch, but I don't think anything you said right there was a stretch at all. It seems pretty damn obvious to me that that they consciously uh, were inspired by some Gnostic themes and other religious themes as well.
Oh, there is actually one more thing. Barbello, they say that she has what they call triple male, triple power, and triple name. I don't know what that means honestly. Like I don't know what spiritual relevance that has because I never. There are some things about the religion that I just don't understand. But um, basically, she she does everything in triples, I guess. So what I found is that again, if you take Genova, Genova is I actually read this off of somewhere online. Like there's a comparison between these two things, or between Barbello and Genova and whatever. Genova, again, she copies everything that Barbello or Jehovah or the Demiurge copies everything that Barbello does. So if you take Genova, who is supposed to represent the Demiurge, she also does things in triples, it would seem. So if you take Crisis Core into consideration, you have um, Sephiroth, Genesis, and Geo, which are the three males, so triple male, right? And you'd also have, I don't know what this means, but you have three scientists who work with her or who work, digging up what, her cells or whatever. And that would be, Hojo, Hollander, and Gast, right?
Yep.
And I honestly don't know what triple name is, but they even say something like uh, Genova has a way of she has different ways of influencing people. So that's like the physical way, which is her cells, and then she has the mental control, and then something else, which I totally forgot what it was, unfortunately. But it seems like Genova also does things in triples. So I feel like that's just another connection that you can draw to further reinforce, um, her connection to the Demiurge and how the Demiurge connects to Barbello and whatnot. So that's just an extra thing.
Yeah. Cool. Actually, I don't know if I ever mentioned this or not, but in another just in terms of uh, how do I want to say this? Significance in numbers. Like when it comes to the amount of members in your party, you have nine, right? And this three times three is nine. But in reality, Sephiroth is in your party for a short time in that brief flashback in Calm when Cloud's talking about the Nibelheim incident.
Right.
And that number 10 represents the 10 Sephiroth of Jehovah, basically, and every character has its own representation from the 10 Sephiroth.
Well, I never thought of it that way. That's pretty. Yeah, I totally subscribe to that. That's I feel like that's the truth.
It
But
seems cool to me. I mean, even if it's not, it's cool to think about at least.
yeah, to ponder it.
Yeah, but there
Yeah,
seems to be a lot of significance in numbers and names in Final Fantasy VII.
I do wonder if if you add up the numerology of the other birthdays in seven or of the other party members, if they all have a different um number. Because if their numbers do add up to nine, like for instance, Tifa's a six, Cloud's a seven, I know Sid is a three, and Vincent's a two. But I'm wondering if the other ones if they have different numbers that their birthdays add up to, then that could be the nine numerology numbers as well as Sephiroth being the 10th Sephiroth or Sephiroth, I guess. Or there's 10 Sephiroth in the Kabbalah. So
I haven't done the math on all of them, but I would imagine that would probably be the case. I know that in Japanese culture they also think that blood type seems to have some sort of influence on your personality or whatever, and I know that that's listed in, in the characters' biographies as well. But I have no idea what each of them mean. I don't know about you.
I'm not sure either. Um, yeah, I don't know.
I'm guessing there has to be a reason why they would show each character's blood type. I mean, what other? Are they just gonna randomly do that? It seems like nothing else in the games is random. So
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of even having blood types and birthdays anyways? I mean, unless, I don't, to me, again, like, they don't ever mention anyone's birthday, from what I recall, or blood type, so, the only purpose it would serve is to maybe further, the more symbolic aspects of the game.
yeah, that's what I imagine.
Yeah, I agree.
Alrighty, do you have anything else to add before we cut this off and not kill our viewers of boredom?
Yeah, I know, this is like a going to theology class and hopefully not fall asleep.
A little bit, but I'm having fun. I don't know about all of you guys watching. I hope you are too. But yeah, anything else? Any special things you noticed while playing FF7, or anything that hasn't been mentioned yet that you think might be a good sending off?
Um, Well, I mean, I feel like if you focus on cloud, I mean, whether involve symbolism in this or not, um, symbolism does reinforce Cloud's journey. So people are inspired by Cloud regardless because of how he goes through all of his, struggles to find himself. I feel like every human, whether they believe in these religious overtones or not. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people who are like, oh no, you're overthinking it or whatever. To me, that's fine. I think the whole point of the game is for, um, to find some way to relate to Cloud, if that's symbolically or just literally, just taking the game from a literary perspective, just playing the game as it is. I think Cloud and his struggle to find out who he is important regardless. I'm just kind of a nerd in the sense that, and I'm a nerd for religion too. I like studying religion, so I like to look at this from a Gnostic perspective, just for kicks, and it it kind of enriches the experience for me. So it does kind of make me want to go play the game again, type of thing. So I guess that's about all I can say.
It is a game that is well worth multiple plays. Like I've played it at least 10 times through, probably more than that. And I always find something new, like something small that's hidden in a weird part of the game that you wouldn't expect.
Right.
I mean, it's really, really, really well done. In my opinion, it's be the best done story in any game or even movie that I've seen in terms of depth and complexity and how many ways you can interpret it and all that shit.
Right.
So I encourage
Yeah.
everyone to play this game again one more time and try to find something new about it.
Yeah, I'm always interested to hear, anyone's theories or insight. So, I don't think there's really any right or wrong. It's just perception, in my opinion.
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of like religion in itself.
Right.
So, anyways, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. If you have anything to add, please leave a comment and leave a like on the video. Subscribe if you want to hear more. After doing this video, it is very apparent to me that I want to do at least one more um, video involving Final Fantasy VII to just so I can get three and make that significant number part of my own channel as well. And I also do have other ideas I want to talk about more involving like Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus and stuff in Advent Children that we haven't really gotten to in this video or the last video. So if you would like to join me in that video too, that would be great. Um, but if not, I'll be making it sometime in the next month anyways. And for those of you interested, oh shit, Living Lucid. That's your YouTube name, right?
Yep.
Okay. Living Lucid is his YouTube. There is nothing on it at this moment, but we will change that very very soon, and it will be a channel full of great shit. So if you are a fan of thinking a little bit deeper than the average person, that would definitely be a channel for you to go check out.
Yeah, it'd be good. I'm up for anything. So,
All right, awesome. So thank you once again for coming on my channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys soon. Say goodbye.
see you guys later.
Later, guys.